Hey, welcome to the Advanced Answer Studio. Today I want to show you how I put together this 32-foot long balloon garland and break down my methodology for creating a garland this large. So follow along and I'll show you how to make it. To create an interesting balloon garland, the two elements I focus on the most are texture and color choice. And to create texture in a balloon garland, we use multiple sizes of balloons to create visual interest. So for this one, I'm using 16-inch, 11-inch, and 5 and 7-inch balloons in a variety of shades of green and silver to create not only texture, but that visual interest. To create the main body of this balloon garland, I'm going to be inflating my 11 and 16-inch balloons 2 at a time using my electric balloon inflator. Now, whenever you're inflating balloons of different sizes, always have the larger balloon on the trigger side of your balloon inflator, so that way once the smaller balloon is done, you can pull it off the secondary nozzle but keep inflating the larger balloon. Now I'm going to tie these two balloons together by wrapping the nozzles around twice and tying them together in a simple knot. I'll create 20 pairs with a 16-inch balloon in them, and all the rest of my pairs will be only 11-inch balloons. Now, all the 11-inch balloons I'm inflating today are anywhere between 8 and 10 inches in size, and because this is an organic garland, I'm just eyeballing those sizes. Next, we need to turn all those pairs into quads. So take 2 of them and overlap them so that the nozzles touch in the center, and wrap 1 balloon from each pair around each other, locking them together into a quad. Repeat this step until all the balloons are tied up in quads, and then we can start assembling the garland. I like to tie my balloons together using an empty 260 balloon, but you could use fishing line or curling ribbon to tie them together as well. So to start off, I'm going to take the end of my 260, pinch it right against the nozzles of my first quad, and wrap it around those balloons a couple times to secure it in place. I'm then going to take my second quad and nestle it right up against that first one, stretch that 260 nice and tight, and wrap it across the nozzles of the new quad, and then wrap it around 2 balloons in that quad, securing them together. Now I want to rotate these around so that they nestle nice and snugly together, always making sure that 260 comes right back to the center. Now I'm going to add a quad in the same way, but this one has a 16-inch balloon in it. I'm going to add one of these 16-inch quads almost every other balloon quad. So in total, I've got 45 quads for this overall garland, and about 20 of those have 16-inch balloons in them. By following this pattern, I'll get a nice even distribution of my 16-inch balloons across the entire balloon garland. At a certain point, you'll run out of a 260 balloon to keep adding quads to, so if that happens, you can just add another 260 by tying them end to end, and you can keep adding balloons until you reach the final length. Once you get to the end of the garland, take the remaining 260 tail, wrap it around that final quad in a figure-8 pattern a couple times, and that will secure all the balloons together. Then just let the end of that 260 go, and the balloon will disappear into the garland. Now, because this balloon garland is so large, I've actually broken it up into 6-foot sections. So I've got 4 sections that have 9 quads each, and then I made 2 smaller sections that have 4 to 5 quads each. I wrapped up each of these small sections in these large balloon bags and tied them off for easy transportation to the event site. Because if I had made this one long garland already assembled, I probably would have had to have rented a box truck to get them to the site. Now let's focus on making the accent balloons I'll add to the main balloon garland once we get to the event site. So first of all, I'm going to inflate my 5-inch balloons to 4 pumps of air or 4.5 inches in diameter, and my 7-inch balloons to 10 pumps of air or 6 inches in diameter. I'm inflating both of these balloons at the same time, so I only have to tie 1 knot instead of 3. So I'm going to overlap these balloons and tie the nozzles together just like we did the larger balloons. I'm going to tie 120 of these together, making sure I mix up the color combinations, and then once I got them all into pairs, I'm going to twist 2 of those together, making a quad. Once I've got 30 of these tiny quads, I'm going to bag them up in a large trash bag and move on to inflating my final balloons, which are these specially branded 9-inch balloons that were from this organization. Now, this special branding is only on one side of the balloon, and it's not on the end of the balloon, so I can't tie these into the garland and still have this logo facing outwards. So I'm going to inflate all of these 9-inch balloons individually and tie them off, and then I'll stick them into the garland using some glue dashes later on. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these inflated, and we can finally move to our event site and start setting up. This backdrop is 12 feet wide and 10 feet tall, and if you'd like to have any of the pieces I'm using for this backdrop setup, I'll have everything linked in the description box below. Along the top pole between each of my fabric panels, I'm going to take an empty 260 and tie it to that horizontal pole. I'll use these 260 tails to tie the garland to the backdrop. Now you'll notice that my backdrop is not 10 feet high. It's actually only about 4.5 feet. and that'll make it so much easier to attach my balloons to the backdrop without needing to get up on a ladder. Now I'm going to take my first 6-foot section, align it with one of the top corners of my backdrop stand, and then while I'm holding that garland in place, I'm going to take a 260 balloon, stretch it out over the top of my garland, and wrap it in a figure 8 pattern around a couple of the balloons that are right in front of it. This will hold the garland in place, but also allows me enough flexibility that I can rotate the balloons around until I'm happy with their final placement. After I hung a second balloon garland right next to it, I want to bring the ends of these together. So I'm going to tie a 260 balloon to each of those ends and snug them together nice and tight so it looks like one continuous balloon garland across the top of the stand. Next, I'm going to add in those tiny quads we made earlier. Now I've taken an empty 260 balloon, cut it in half, and tied one of those tiny clusters on either end of it. And by stretching that 260 out and placing it behind 1 or 2 balloons in that balloon garland, gives us a really easy way to tie in all these tiny balloons without having to make lots of knots. I added these clusters about every 2 feet across the garland, making sure I focus them on the underside of the garland because that'll be the angle that most people will be viewing this from. I also want to make sure I get all of my accent balloons placed across the top of this before I raise it up because I don't want to have to break a ladder out to adjust those balloons later. So always take a step back and look at the overall design before you move on to the next step. After raising the backdrop stand, I went ahead and added the rest of my balloon garland to the side sections of my backdrop stand. So I took the 260 that was coming out of the end of each of those garlands, wrapped it around a balloon or two from the previous garland so that it looks like one long string. I then secured all the garlands to the side poles using a couple more 260s by tying those to the backdrop frame and then wrapping them in a figure 8 pattern around a couple of the balloons in the garland. Then I went over the entire thing with the rest of my accent balloons, adding those every couple feet, and then as the final touch, I attached all the branded balloons. So I would hold the balloon about where I thought it should be, and then took note of where it was touching 1 or 2 balloons next to it, and used that as a guide of where to place the glue dashes on the branded balloon. After I stuck it in place, I went back with a pair of scissors and cut off all the nozzles of these branded balloons, so it would give it a nice clean look. And now this backdrop is ready for the award ceremony. If you enjoyed this project, hit that like button, subscribe below, and don't forget to check out our Patreon group. Patrons get exclusive access behind the scenes of setups I do, and from this project, I show you exactly what I include in my balloon setup kit. So until the next time, remember, stay creative everybody! Bye!